I was informed that most of you are not really interested in Buddhism, but you're interested in happiness and meditation. But I will need to preface my talk this morning with a few general comments about the Buddhist tradition, because it will, of course, form the foundation for what I'm going to say. And I'd like to make a distinction between Buddhism and the religious traditions that we are familiar with in the West. Now, we now often use the word faith in place of the word religion. So those two words are seen to be more or less synonymous. We talk about Christian faith, Islamic faith, and so on. And I would characterize the great monotheistic religions that grew up in the Middle East, such as Christianity, Islam, Judaism, as essentially belief systems. And because our exposure to religions is almost exclusively to the belief system kind of religion, that we tend to assume that all religions are basically the same thing, except people who belong to different religions believe different things. Now my proposition here is that Buddhism is a different kind of religion altogether. It is not a belief system religion. It doesn't have dogmas that you have to believe in. And this is why many people say Buddhism is not really a religion. So I'm not going to get into sort of discussion of definitions of terms here, but you could either say, okay, it's not a religion, or you can say, well, we need to expand our definition of what religions are. My understanding of Buddhism is that it is an education system. So it's a radically different way of looking at religion. It's not looking at religion as a faith, as a set of dogmas that you believe in and try to live by, but it's an education system. So it's very much human-based, and it's based on, and its focus and interest is on our life as human beings, and what is it really all about. And the Buddha taught that in our life we experience a lot of unnecessary suffering, disease, discontent, because we lack a true understanding of ourselves and the world that we live in. And so the Buddhist teachings focus on ways of educating and training our conduct, our speech, our emotions, our intellect in a harmonious, or to use a modern term, holistic way, in order to eliminate all of this unnecessary suffering that we create for ourselves, and simultaneously allowing us to access, to experience various levels of happiness which we do not ordinarily realize, and we lack, I think, a really systematic approach to our lives. So let me give you an example. When we have a major problem or crisis, like I've just been reading about the world food crisis at the moment. So what happens when we have this crisis? There's suffering, a lot of suffering. So we start to look at the causes and the conditions. What are the conditioning factors for the food crisis in the world at the moment? And we'll put our heads together and make various come forward with various hypotheses, and then we think, well, what can we do about it, given the resources that we have, given the constraints and so on and so forth? What can we practically do about it? What do we need to do first? What do we need to do second? And so on and so forth. And this is absolutely basic to the way that we live in the world, isn't it? But what the Buddha is pointing to is that there's a huge disjunction between the very rational, intelligent, thoughtful way we deal with problems external to ourselves and the way we deal with the world inside ourselves. And so when we experience a crisis, pain, suffering in our lives, instead of developing an ability to sit back and look, gather information, reflect, make an analysis and find skillful means of dealing, what do? Well, we turn our back on it, try to get away from it, take a pill, go shopping, eat something, and we have these various unsatisfactory and ultimately unfulfilling sort of stopgap methods of dealing with the pain and the discomfort in our lives. And so, very simply, what Buddhism is saying, why don't we use the same intelligence that we apply to the external world in our own life? And it's not, therefore, a mystical or metaphysical program we're talking about here, but in many ways it's an application of common sense. And certainly when I first came across the Buddha's teachings in my teens, I didn't in any way feel I was encountering an exotic Eastern religion. It just seemed to me absolutely obvious and common sense that as long as we lack any true understanding of ourselves, then we lack skill in dealing with thoughts, emotions, our daily life, and we become so easily prey to all forms of greed and hatred and delusion and things that cloud, sully, and upset us. So we experience unnecessary suffering within our lives and in our relationships with other members of our family and the communities and the societies we live in, the world at large. And that although we are not in any way devaluing or overlooking the importance of external factors in the subjective experience of happiness or unhappiness in life, what the Buddha is pointing out to is that there is one factor which is perhaps more important and more central than any others, and that is our own response to events, whether they are external or internal. And that is where we have some responsibility, opportunity, and some freedom to take control of our lives and to find a way forward in our lives. So the Buddhist way is saying, okay, can we at least accept that we would all like to be free of pain and unhappiness in our life, and we would all like to lead a life characterized by a sense of well-being and happiness. If that's so, how are we going to go about that? Well, and particularly, what are the obstacles to that kind of happiness? Because I think a failure, I would say, of most religious philosophical traditions is that so often we're being told how we should be, and we all know that already, don't we? We should be kind and generous and good and honest and so on and so forth. I mean, every one of us could write down a list of all the things that we should be. But the problem is that we're very seldom given any clear, precise, systematic information and advice on how to get from where we are now to how we should be. And so people start to feel guilty and start to feel self-aversion and think, I'm hopeless, I'm just such a bad person. My religion tells me I should be like this and I just can't do it. And so you feel this sense of sort of helplessness and sometimes even despair, and often carrying a large burden of guilt around. And so what particularly drew me to Buddhism is its pragmatic quality, and it's willing just to start off with, well, how are we right now? Okay, we can have some goals, we need aspirations in life, but we also need some very down-to-earth techniques and reflections and changes in our conduct and in our general way of life to enable this movement towards our goals and aspirations to take place. And as I say, the most fundamental teachings of the Buddha is that we lack a true understanding of the way things are, and that we also, at the same time, every one of us, man, woman, child of all nations, have the capacity or the potential to realize the way things are. So, to put it most broadly, our general sense of discontent in life and feeling that it's not quite right, nothing ever is just exactly how you want it to be. There's always something missing. That kind of underlying, gnawing sense of disease that we carry around with us is not somehow intrinsic to the human condition, but is based on the fact that our whole way of looking at life, our whole way we think about things, the way we look at ourselves, the way we look at other people, is out of sync. It doesn't relate accurately to the way things are. So the movement towards happiness is also simultaneously a movement towards vision and understanding. So it means we're looking very closely at our life in all of its different aspects and various spheres of activity. And this is why I think it's very important to recognize that meditation is not some kind of wish-fulfilling gem. It's not some kind of magic bullet that's going to make things all right. You become an ace meditator and then you're happy all the time. It doesn't work like that. And if you're not very thoughtful and reflective about the way that you're, for instance, relating to your spouse, your children, the people around you, your workmates, your friends, your family, if you're leading a very heedless and reckless kind of life in the world, then meditation, well, it may have a sort of band-aid kind of benefit for you. You might be able to get by. It might reduce your need for tranquilizers or sleeping pills, make you a little bit more relaxed. But that's all. And I think that meditation within a context of a whole sense of spiritual effort, transformation of all areas of your life, when it's firmly embedded in context, is when meditation becomes truly transformative, and really you can see some wonderful changes in your life. So now from here, I think the first thing that we realize, if we're willing to look interested in looking at experience rather than living by assumptions and habit, is that very effort is extremely difficult, to turn the light inwards rather than always outwards, and to be looking at, okay, what's going on inside me, what's really happening right now. what does it really mean to be a human being right now? It's incredibly difficult because you're going against the grain so much. You realise that the means by which you can experience more happiness, contentment, ease, sense of well-being, meaning in your life, the human mind is incredibly undisciplined. And the first thing that you realise, and it's a sobering realisation, is your mind's a mess. Okay, so that's wisdom, to see that. That's the first arising of wisdom. My mind is a mess. But if it stops there, it's depressing. But the fact is, you need a basic confidence that it doesn't need to be a mess. And this is why we look up to great teachers. Started off in the same boat. Their minds were a mess, but through their efforts, they proved that it is possible to do something constructive about that. And it does need a certain amount of humility, and I think that you have to face up to the fact that we lie to ourselves a lot, we delude ourselves a lot, not just consciously but unconsciously, and it is a voyage of discovery, but sometimes it can be a tough one. Now you may not totally agree with what I've just said there, but I'll give you an interesting example of this. There's a professor in one of the Californian universities, I think it's South California, brilliant man called Charles Tart, and he did over a period of years a number of experiments on hypnosis, and so he'd get some of his student volunteers together, and for instance, in the hypnotic state, he would say, after you come out of the hypnotic state, I'm going to say to you, would you like a cup of coffee? And when I say, would you like a cup of coffee, I want you to walk over to the door and put up the umbrella. Okay? And so he snaps his fingers, the young man comes out of the hypnotic state, and Professor Tart sitting there and said, would you like a cup of coffee? So the guy immediately gets up, walks over to the door, puts up the umbrella. And Professor Tart says, why did you do that? And he said, well, when I was walking here this morning, it looked a bit drizzly, and I didn't bring my raincoat with me, and I saw that umbrella there, and it didn't seem to belong to anybody, and I was just wondering whether it was usable, and I might borrow. So the point being, he had immediately a string of extremely plausible, rational reasons for something which was absolutely, completely, 100% irrational. The only reason he put up that umbrella was because he was told to do so in a hypnotic state. And the implications of this, if you think about it, ask yourself, how many times has that happened in your life? I mean, he had no awareness of it. Our brains are just incredible, instruments that can just do the most amazing things. And one of them is rationalization, and that's not a sort of conscious deceit. It's something that happens unconsciously and automatically and at great speed. And that's just one example of the sort of untrustworthy nature of the uneducated or untrained mind. Now, a lot of times we also, I think, have a general sense when things are not quite right, when there's some kind of problem brewing or something, but because our lives generally are so caught up with so much activity that we just sort of, I don't have time for that right now, don't go there, it's or I start thinking like that, I wouldn't do anything, so there's a sense of there are certain kind of no-go areas and certain kind of things that we just don't want to pursue, we don't want to think about, or the implications of it are just too huge right now, just got too much on, so you're just putting on it. And in the long term, this has certain repercussions, and it can beginning with physical health, of course, and then going on to emotional, spiritual health. So what the Buddha is saying is we have to find time in our daily life to stop, just to put everything down, just for a short period of time at least, and to just be nobody for a short period every day. You know, you're somebody all day. You know, and all kinds of different people. You know, maybe you're a daughter, you're a mum, you're a sister, you're an employee, you're an employer, you're a friend. You're so many different people you have to be in the day, and they all take their toll. And so, just to be able to stop and just to put all that down a certain period of days, it's wonderful, relaxing. But that's not the end of it. The relaxation is a kind of a byproduct, if you like. Yeah, it's a wonderful byproduct, but it's not the heart of it. The heart of it is that you're developing like a camera, kind of a zoom function. You're able to zoom inwards and look at just exactly what's going on in a very precise kind of way, but also to zoom out of your daily life and just look at the big picture, because that's what's so easily lost. And we can see we tend to lose our balance in life so much. Some people, of course, go to the extreme of becoming very idealistic people. It's just my ideal is up there, and so the classic kind of story, walk into a puddle or something because they're looking up at the sky. So someone who's so kind of absorbed with ideals and very kind of naive and lacking in care and attention to the details of daily life. Whereas other people, of course, get so kind of obsessed with the details they forget what you're doing it for in the first place. So that ability to withdraw from life and from one's various responsibilities a certain part of the day is the very first step in developing this sense of well-being and happiness and an ability to re-evaluate or to that nice thing to recognize. We're recognizing what we're actually doing. We're recognizing, looking again, looking afresh, and we lack that freshness in life. Going back to that, the point about the hypnosis again. I always found, watching documentaries or reading it just seems a bit phony. Sort of uses, this kind of you're feeling sleepy, you're feeling sleepy. You think, come on, that doesn't look real. They're just acting or something. So I spoke to someone who's a hypnotist, and I said, "Is that for real? Is that really possible? That you can hypnotize people?" And he said, "Yes. Well, the basic fact is that most people's consciousness is only that far from hypnosis, from the hypnotic state. So all you need is just a slight nudge and you're over the edge, you see, because so much of our life we live on automatic pilot. We have to, at a certain extent. We can't be thinking and reflecting, and it's just too much going on, so we take shortcuts. But what that means over a course of time is that our mind tends to go into very deep ruts and conditioned and habitual ways of relating to each other and to life, and we lose that sense of freshness and wakefulness. Now the word Buddha means the awakened one, and so spiritual life in Buddhism is conceived of a process of awakening, waking up to life, waking up to what's going on right now. So it's not a matter of believing in things, because if you believe in things, then you're always going to have a sense of a certain amount of tension, a certain amount. If you take belief as sort of your core virtue in life, you're always going to find doubt as a kind of a demon and something that's threatening. Or meeting people who have different beliefs can be quite challenging. And it's very hard to go beyond the sense of us, we who believe like this, and they who believe like the other. So putting more focus on awakening and being awake and aware. And the most practical way to begin to do this, as I say, is giving yourself some time every day to be with yourself and to be with the way things are. And this, I would argue, is in no way as some kind of selfish endeavour, in the sense that the more inner peace, contentment, happiness that you experience, then the more happiness, peace that you have to spread around. It affects the way that you relate to your family and friends and the people around you. It's not something that's a kind of just sort of putting money in the bank and it's yours and no one can touch it, but it should be hopefully affecting your whole life. So in meditation, the first task is to develop the power of attention and the ability to be present in the present moment. And this is something which really should, in a civilization as advanced as this one, be considered absolute basic mental hygiene. Just as you teach children to wash their hands after they go to the toilet. I mean, it's at that level, really. I mean, the importance of having some inner discipline and being able to be present, to experience. Now, the way to go about this is that you take one particular object as an anchor for your awareness, and it could be any one of a number of things. One of the most popular object in the Buddhist tradition is the breath. I think this is a good example. You don't need any great leap of faith. You don't have to be a Buddhist, to be aware of your in-breath and your out-breath, whatever religious tradition you belong to, or even if you're an atheist or whatever, you breathe in and you breathe out, I hope. So it's a matter of bringing your mind to the sensation of breath, the whole in-breath and the whole out-breath. Now, of course, the mind rebels, and it doesn't want to do that. It's just so contrary to the way that we usually allow our mind to wander here, there, and everywhere. So there's a certain amount of tension involved, and the virtue which you rely on the most to begin with is patience. So where does patience come from? So we have to look at that. Why is it that we can be patient with some things and not with others? Why can we find ourselves extremely impatient in traffic or with people that we don't know, but we can be incredibly, almost supernaturally patient with our children? It's because, we love our children. In other words, because we see some meaning and some value and some purpose in being patient with our children, we can be patient. Because we don't see any particular value, purpose in being patient with people who annoy us in the traffic jams, then perhaps we're not. So here there's a little bit of wisdom arising already. We see that it's not a matter, I'm a patient person or I'm not a patient person, but patience is a conditioned mental phenomena which can be weakened or strengthened in various ways. And the things that, if we decide that patience is something we want to develop, then we give attention to the supporting factors for it, which are faith, confidence, seeing the value of something. So in the case of meditation, if you decide, meditation is something that I really see would be of value in my life, it's something that I want to develop, and so I'm willing to be patient with the mental agitation and the difficulty of doing it. So now meditation is not sort of like you're either successful or you're a failure at meditation, because it's the essence, it's a very important part of what I call this education process. So in using the breath as an anchor for what we call mindfulness or awareness, then we illuminate all those mental factors, all the things going on in our mind which are unmindful. We begin to see our habits, the ways that we create this unnecessary suffering in our mind through the way we think about things, through particular habits that we've developed since we were children or perhaps before. So the fact that you can't keep your mind on the breath doesn't mean you can't meditate, doesn't mean you're hopeless, this isn't for you. But what you are beginning to see is the way your mind works, and this is really what it ultimately it's about. Initially what tends to happen is your mind's going here, there and everywhere, and you just very calmly, deliberately, firmly bring the mind back. Again, to the analogy of looking after your child, I think it's good, child is crawling off to somewhere dangerous, while you're doing the ironing or something, you're not going to get angry with it. What the child doesn't know, what's dangerous, what's not dangerous. So now don't crawl over there. Come back over here. And you carry on, come back. And as a mother, you realise that's the way small children are. You're not going to get angry or resentful about it. And similarly, this is the way your mind is. It's never been trained. It's never been educated. It's never been disciplined in even the most basic kind of way. So it's absolutely inevitable that your mind is not going to want to stay with the breath initially. So you bring it back. But then after a while you start to notice certain patterns, how do you know if you're getting old? Not without looking in the mirror. In very simple ways. If you notice when you're meditating, most of your wayward thoughts are about the future, then you're still young, or young at heart. But if the vast majority of your thoughts are about the past, then it means that you're getting on a bit, okay? So there you go, it's a way to know. But then you begin to see, that there are thoughts of the past and thoughts of the future. So you may well have heard, this idea, this idea of learning to live in the present. But it's important to clarify that a bit. This doesn't mean just to kind of forget the past, don't think about the future, just enjoy the present moment. I mean that's obviously not a very functional or even safe way of living your life. But what's important to recognize is that the vast majority of the thoughts that you have, most of the time that you're thinking about the past, it is in no way beneficial to you in the present. And the vast majority of the thoughts that you have about the future, similarly, are not of any benefit to you in the present. So you're taking your present sense of well-being and welfare and benefit and ability to fulfill your responsibilities as your criteria. So in the case of meditation, then you are going to cut off almost all thoughts of the past. Thoughts of the past that may be a benefit would be having received instructions on how to meditate, and in the meditation process you perhaps reach a certain kind of problem or difficulty, then it pops up in your mind. This is, the teacher said at this particular junction you should do this rather than do that, or beware of this, beware of that. So that's a thought of the past, which you certainly don't want to ignore. Similarly, thoughts of the future, they have a place. Not so much in the meditation, but in daily life, of course. We have various things that we need to attend to, and we need to decide which are the important ones, which are the unimportant ones, which are the ones that need to be seen to immediately, which are not so urgent. And so we do the important and the urgent ones first, and the unimportant and unurgent ones last, if at all. I mean, this is obvious that nobody at all wants to eliminate that kind of thinking. But the idea in Buddhism is what we're trying to develop is a freedom, an inner freedom and liberation, where thinking is our servant rather than our master. And for most of us, thinking is the master, and we think because, we just think. We don't like kind of a vacuum, you've got to fill it up with something. If there's something that you really need to think about, then, you'll find something, And so spend a lot of time daydreaming or just going over and over and over the same old things again and again and again and again. Or maybe you get a little bit bored, a little bit depressed, and you just think of some good thing that happened in the past, or you think, never mind, next week I'll be going on holiday, and so you're constantly sort of consoling yourself and trying to get away from present disease here, functioning as a sense of boredom and lack of interest, by thinking of something, using memory and imagination as a strategy to deal with present discontent and dis-ease. So what Buddha is saying is that's not the most intelligent way of dealing with life, and there's a better way. And in meditation, we're learning to recognize thought as thought, and feelings as feelings, and emotions as emotions. Now that may seem tautologous, it may seem obvious, but it's not. I mean, after you've been thinking for a while and you say, what were you thinking about? Yes, you could say, I was thinking about this and that. But what we start to observe and notice is that at the moment that we're thinking, we're not aware that we're thinking, really, when there's a feeling. We're not experiencing thought, as a mental phenomenon, a feeling or emotion as an emotion. So there are two things here, two modes, two aspects. You have the phenomena in terms of content and then process. Okay? And so our minds are habitually obsessed on content rather than on process. And what we're doing in meditation is learning to move away from that way of looking at things and seeing things in terms of process. Now, in terms of process, apart from, say, content, you may be thinking, what am I going to have for lunch today? Okay, that's just kind of thought pop up in your mind. It's getting late, what should I have for lunch today? Okay, nothing wrong with that. But what tends to happen is because of the unnatural or overriding interest in content, then the mind tends to grasp onto that and then make a story out of it. So then you say, maybe I'll have this, or maybe shall I eat there, or shall I eat here? And so your mind carries this on. So this is a very important thing to observe with thinking, that there's an initial impulse, and it may be, you're sitting and you hear sound of somebody walking about the street, and so you hear somebody say, let's go and buy an ice cream, and you hear that, and immediately say, ice cream, I wouldn't mind an ice cream, that's a good thing. And so your mind takes something up that just comes into your mind and runs with it. And that is one of the most dangerous and destructive habits that we have. Because of that lack of awareness, at the moment that there is impact through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body and mind, a thought arises as a consequence of that, and at that moment the lack of awareness leads us automatically, habitually, to embroider upon it, to proliferate, to add on to it. And in many ways it can be not just a waste of time, but can actually lead the mind to be depressed or anxious and so on and so forth. So in meditation, what you're learning to do is to develop this sharpness and clarity of mind. And so it's that when there is a thought arising, before there can be that addition and the story and so on and so forth, there is awareness not just of the content of the thought about ice cream, but the awareness of the thought as an event, as a mental event, something that has just arisen in your mind and will very shortly pass away. So you're moving towards this awareness of experience as a stream of things arising and passing away, arising and passing away. And that is one of the sort of fundamental kind of realignment of your whole kind of subjective experience of your life. And it is revolutionary. I mean, it may not sound strange or normal, but simply that. This is where you suddenly realize you have a real, within your hands, you have a very real, very effective means of positively influencing your sense of well-being in life. You don't have to, allow your mind to take you off here and take you off there. Somebody says, "Oh, you look nice today." And you say, "Oh, thank you." And you're sort of up on cloud nine for a while, and then you're walking to somebody else's. I don't know what she's wearing that for. She's really fat in that, and suddenly and so in daily life, your mind's going up and down, just by things people say, things that people have, things that, because there's no awareness of just how this is all taking place. It's not some kind of a black box on an aeroplane. It's something you can look at and be aware of in real time with a certain amount of training. And this is what meditation is really all about. It's not developing this kind of sense of floating off into another world where you don't have to worry about life anymore for a second. You come out and you feel better, and you say, "Okay, now I'm ready to go on and deal with things again." So it's not this kind of like a hit, like a drug or something like this. But it's a very effective way of changing your whole experience of life, and a very important, fundamental way of reducing and eliminating the kinds of mental habits that cause unnecessary suffering and discomfort. So the power of what we call mindfulness. Now, when you develop that on the breathing, for instance, just a technical point here and a tip, if you like, is that how you think about meditation is going to influence your experience of it, and perhaps it applies to all activities. But with meditation, if you think, "I've got to concentrate on an object," and suddenly it's a task, and it's kind of, brings up all kinds of energies about, "I've got to do it, can I do it, I know I probably can't, I'm hopeless," and all these kinds of things. So how can we avoid that? And secondly, is there a way of looking at meditation to reduce the interest in the distracting thoughts? And so the answer is yes, by creating a sense of enjoyment of the meditation object, because it's fundamental to the way we live. That it's easier to be with something you enjoy than something you don't enjoy, and that often you will observe that the reason that your mind doesn't want to stay with your meditation object is because it enjoys thinking about something else. So if you can create a sense of interest, enthusiasm, enjoyment of your meditation object, the likelihood that your mind's going to wander off in search of greener pastures is much reduced. So one way of looking at meditation, and I'm offering this to you as a suggestion, you might try this, is just think, okay, my meditation is to enjoy an in-breath and enjoy an out-breath. You just think, what does that mean? What could that mean for me? To enjoy the sensation of inhalation and enjoy not just the beginning but the whole duration of the breath, because the point here is we're learning to sustain attention. It's what happens with most of it. We are addicted to stimuli. So a new stimulus arises, and it's not difficult to be interested in that. But then the interest, not being sustained, falls away. We become bored, and we look for something new. And this is the tendency that we're going against in meditation. We're taking an object like the breath, which is not, incredibly exciting. But the fact remains is, if you are willing to be with the sensation of the breath in the present moment, it is intensely enjoyable. It's probably the most enjoyable thing, believe it or not, you could ever experience. It's absolutely marvelous, because it's not the breath itself so much as the quality of attention. And once you experience that just a little bit, then the vistas become very exciting, and you begin to realize that there are all kinds of opportunities in just your ordinary daily life where you can experience some real enjoyment and sense of well-being. Beginning with having a shower, brushing your teeth, getting dressed, walking up and down the stairs, standing in the lift, cooking, all kinds of activities in which you don't need to use your brain. You don't need to be thinking about it. You don't have to be reflecting on how to brush your teeth or how to have a shower. You know how to do these things. But what generally happens is with our daily activities which don't demand a lot of thought and reflection, the mind daydreams, or you just fall into this whatever your what's the daily worry today, the daily anxiety or the something or other, just something to go on to keep on going on. But now you're saying, well, okay, let me see if I can enjoy brushing my teeth. What would that mean? How could I enjoy brushing my teeth? How could I enjoy having a shower? I mean, I'm not talking about sort of the sensual thrill of it, but the sense of incredible kind of well-being and groundedness that we can experience when we can just do something simply to do it well, to do it with a sense of respect and a sense of interest, and to be there with that particular action. So this is if you can develop this kind of skill, you can punctuate your day, which may well be full of all kinds of activities and interactions, but with just short 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute periods of just coming back to yourself, standing in the lift. You don't have to look at the mirror, just sort of, in the lift, you can just sit quietly and breathe in, stand quietly, breathe in, breathe out, just be totally there in the lift, walking to your car. And so coming back to yourself, re-establishing attention, not allowing some particular train of thought, some particular emotion to just carry you with it. And you're taking some responsibility, feel like a sense of self-reliance. And the practice of awareness, I'm talking about, it does have ethical dimension. And I think this again is something I'd really like to stress here. If we say, well, just being whatever you're doing, it's let's say cracking a safe, breaking into a bank, totally there, totally present. Is that what you're talking about? Well, if it's not, why not? What's the difference, between doing something which is really hurtful or harmful to somebody else, but being totally there and not thinking about the past or the future or anything else? Well, the point being that the kind of awareness and presence of mind which is liberating, which is spiritually fulfilling, is one in which there is the recollection and the awareness of context, awareness of repercussions, the awareness of what's really going on here, the big picture. And so the Buddhist teaching is that there is an enlightened state. And the Buddha realized it, and his greatest disciples have realized it through the ages. And that enlightened state is one in which the mind is completely and utterly free of every kind of suffering and of all of its conditioning factors, which are grouped into greed, hatred, and delusion. Now, that enlightened state is not confined to an absence of certain things, but there is simultaneously, complementarily, a presence, most particularly of wisdom and compassion and inner freedom. So this is the Buddhist ideal, this state of free of suffering and its causes, a mind which is bright and pure and full of wisdom and compassion. And so from that highest state, then we have a criteria for right and wrong, good and bad, appropriate, inappropriate in our daily life. We have a real sense of direction, a compass. We say, well, any action of body, speech, mind, which increases the amount of suffering, the amount of greed, hatred, and delusion in our mind, is bad, wrong, inappropriate, whatever word you want to use. Whatever frees the mind, whatever reduces the power of those defilements, as we call them, and increases power of wisdom, compassion, peace, this is good, appropriate, and so on. So now you have a criteria. So being mindful and being present is not just that, you're not thinking about other things, you're there with brushing your teeth or there, but there is this sense of, is this what we call wholesome or unwholesome, leading towards my goals and aspirations in life, my spiritual aspirations, or leading away from them. So that is also an aspect of what we call mindfulness. Now, meditation, as I said, will only really start to have some of these benefits and be effective when there is this holistic, complete approach to life, and beginning with life in society, we need to be living in such a way that we're not sort of betraying our ideals, and we're not undermining them. And in particular, the Buddha spoke about creating boundaries for ourselves. And it's absolutely important that these boundaries must not be perceived as commandments from outside of ourselves and backed up by a reward and punishment regime, but that these are boundaries that we take upon ourselves as a way of educating our conduct. So we have in Buddhism what we call precepts. Say, first precept, not to harm, not to kill, not to oppress, and so on. And so a Buddhist says, I undertake the training rule. I undertake the education of my conduct based upon refraining from hurting others. And so that becomes an object of recollection. You've taken it on voluntarily as a way of training yourself, and you think about it a lot. Now, that's being able to recollect, to remember those standards and those boundaries is the essence of the education in the external sphere. Okay, so this mindfulness, awareness of the breath means not allowing yourself to forget the breath. And in daily life it means developing ability not to forget the standards that you've adopted, realistic, workable standards, and having them in the forefront of your mind and being able to recollect them, not before and after some kind of crisis, but at the moment of the crisis itself. And so creating boundaries and finding the means and training, educating yourself to live within those boundaries gives rise to self-respect and self-esteem. Now when that is allied to a practice of giving, sharing, service, those are the two fundamental pillars on which spiritual effort, spiritual progress must be based. The self-respect which comes from being able to live within boundaries based on respect for others and goodwill, loving kindness for our fellow beings, and a sense of empowerment and well-being that comes from being someone who gives, who shares. And that conventional self-image of someone who, through giving, you see, and it doesn't have to be material things, it can be giving of time to someone who's lonely and unhappy, the sharing of knowledge, sharing of anything, giving anything that you have, material, immaterial, which you value and you think that you know would be of benefit to someone else. Sharing some part of that creates warm feelings in the community and in the society in which we live, and binds people together in the society in a good way. But it changes the way that you look upon yourself, because now you can see perhaps in a very humble way, I am someone who can, at least just in a tiny, very humble way, reduce the amount of suffering of others. I'm someone in maybe just a very small way, someone who can increase the pleasure and happiness of others. And those two things, living within boundaries and developing this practice, spiritual practice of giving and sharing, creates the emotional stability and self-respect and liking the self that you need to really be able to pursue this spiritual path. So, sometimes we know the famous saying of Michelangelo, how did you sculpt this incredible horse or whatever? He says, well, I just chip away everything that's not the horse. So, and this is the same kind of idea. Happiness is not somewhere out there. It's just being more intelligent and capable about removing all the things which are preventing you from really experiencing this sense of well-being, which in a way is our inheritance as human beings. It means interest in looking at experience, not just sort of wanting to grasp onto the present things and hold them for as long as we can, and squeeze out every single drop of pleasure and happiness from them, and try and push away certain things. I don't want that, I don't like that, because there's never any peace in that way. You're always very conditioned. I can only be happy when I have this, and I can only be happy when I don't have that. That's not the best way. But understanding the nature of experience, particularly in the way that it rises and passes away according to causes and conditions, and you can influence and affect the arising and passing away of both pleasant and unpleasant conditions by systematic, intelligent, consistent effort with regard to the causes and conditions of those phenomena. Now that may sound very technical, but when you start to meditate, and a lot of these things just become more and more obvious. But it is an attitude of looking towards life. You say, yeah, I want to learn about this. What's this all about? That's the kind of fundamental idea of life as lifelong learning, not just learning about particular subjects and skills, but learning about being a human being. This is I think the way to have it. And just to end with a lovely story, a true story about a Tibetan monk who was, as a child, taken to be a Rinpoche, as to say, a great monk who's reborn, which meant that from an early age he took on responsibility as abbot of various monasteries in eastern Tibet. This is before Chinese invasion, of course. And he was taken on a kind of inspection tour, visiting various monasteries in rural Tibet. And he and his entourage walked into this monastery up in the mountains, and suddenly this really big, fierce dog came out. He's barking, and he's really. And of course, in the East, you see a dog like that. It's not just the fear of being bitten, but there's a possibility of rabies, and so this big dog came in, and of course he comes towards the group of monks, and everyone scatters, sort of running off towards us, and leaving this teenage monk standing there, and he looks at the dog, and he just strides straight towards the dog, and the dog goes, "Ugh!" and and the dog ran away, and this is Tibetan teachers will give this as a good example. This is your attitude. Something really frightening comes. It's not always the safest thing to run away. Sometimes you just developing that inner power. And whatever comes. I feel I have the inner resources, and I have the mental stability and calm, and I'm going to look right into the dog's eyes and just because in the end it's just that. It's nothing more than that. I'm seeing that. Whatever appearance, it's just that. A thought, no matter horrible, terrible thought you might have in your mind, it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means a bad thought has arisen and passed away in your mind. It's like you have a TV, and this incredibly violent movie comes on. It doesn't mean that your TV's violent. It's just a movie. And so all these horrible visions and things. Sometimes horrible thoughts, very aggressive thoughts. It's just something that's arising, passing away in your mind. All very wonderful, inspiring, beautiful thoughts. Something arising, passing away in your mind. And being able to see that the way your mind works, that ultimately is the way to real well-being and peace and happiness. So I'd like to end my discourse at this point.
Anybody like to ask any questions? Sure.
Can you recommend any books in its introduction to
Yes, well, so there are various kind of different kinds of book. Some that are sort of more general introduction to Buddhism and history of Buddhism and the whole kind of Buddhist thing. Others more involved in the Buddhist teachings as such. Perhaps what I would suggest is that there are these days a number of very good websites in which you can sort of pick and choose the kind of where your interest is, and of this school of Buddhism, there are a number of a good place to start is a website called Access to Insight. That's one word, accesstoinsight.org, which is a website run by an American monk who also trained in Thailand, who now has a forest monastery in California. But he's collected a lot of the basic texts and some meditation works, introduction to the history, the teachings, and you can sort of look through something like that. Probably a lot more easy than just in a book. It's a bit hit and miss with books sometimes. Then there is a website called Dhamma. That's the Pali word for like the teachings. DHARMA threads. Is it Dhamma threads or Dharma threads?
Could you say it again?
Yes, I'm just checking.
Yes. What Dharma is with the name?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure about this one. It's either DHARMA or DHAMMA threads. Yes, that's the Pali form of the word, and there's a Sanskrit word, and this school of Buddhism uses the Pali form and the other. I won't get into all of that. But I think that this website collects discourses, talks by all the Western monks in my tradition, and so if you'd like to listen rather than read, there's a huge number of talks on any number of topics, all given by English, American, European monks. And that again might be more interesting and enjoyable than plowing through the literature.
Sorry, dharmathreads.org.
Yeah.
Having listened to you today, one wants to pursue learning how to meditate. What would you advise in Brussels? What's the best way to go about it?
Yes, because I just myself arrived in Brussels, then I'm not really sure, what's out there in Brussels itself. Although I was just told there's a centre an hour's drive that someone invited us to go today. Where was that place then?
Near Nami, it's a Tibetan center.
Oh, it's Tibetan centre. I would. It is possible to begin meditating by yourself without an incredible amount of teaching. But ideally, if you can go on a short retreat, so that you can really get a feel for how to apply it in the initial stages, to have some input, some teaching. And the place that I would recommend is one of our monasteries in the UK, which it's only a couple of hours on the train, isn't it, from here? And so again, a website for you is Forest Sangha. That's FORESTSANGHA.org, and that has the addresses and contact numbers for our monasteries in the UK and Europe. We also have a place in Switzerland, and they run regular retreats, weekend retreats, longer retreats, and I think that's probably the best way to really get established in practice. If that's not immediately convenient for you, or in the meantime, say you don't have to meditate for very long to begin with. It's more like any kind of physical exercise. You just gradually increase the time, just do yoga or something like that, and maybe 5 or 10 minutes to begin with. And one, I've talked before, sitting in a posture. All you need to remember is, one, you need to be sitting still, not fidgeting, and because the stillness of the body will help you to be more still in the mind. And secondly, to be sitting up straight, because whereas you're sitting cross-legged or sitting, with your hands in sort of a classic posture like this or like this, basically you just want to be sitting comfortably. But what sitting up straight is, one, if you're like this, very easy to get sleepy. And secondly, the upright posture, if it's not like really too tight, but sort of relaxed upright posture, is one in which you have a sense of independence and self-reliance, which again is very helpful to promoting the kind of mental qualities that you're trying to develop. Keep the eyes closed, and to begin with, just pass your attention down through your body, from your head through your face. Because tension tends to accumulate in some people in their faces, often in your shoulders, maybe in your chest, your tummy, and just sort of pass your attention just down through your head, down through your shoulders, and just relaxing the body, and just be present. What's it feel like? Just to be sitting right now. The body just breathing in, breathing out. And you need to begin with just to remind yourself, what I'm really trying to do now is to be present, to be aware, awake in the present moment, and just remind yourself this isn't a time to think about the past or to think about the future. If you've got something that's you like on your mind right at the moment, some particular kind of issue or problem, you just tell yourself very gently, look, don't get into that right now. This isn't the time for this, okay? All your instructions you want to write at the beginning. You don't want to have to be thinking about these things once you've started meditating. But you just give yourself these instructions at the beginning, and then start to be with the breath. Now, after you have this sense of just sort of contentment, and then you focus your attention on the particular part of the body where you experience the breath most comfortably and most clearly. And for most of us, it's either within the nostril or at the tip of the nose, around the top of the lip. Some people may feel it in the chest area or in the belly. It doesn't really matter, but you choose one particular spot. And then develop sustaining your attention, holding the in-breath and holding the out-breath. And just developing a sense of interest, enjoyment of it, so you're just enjoying the in-breath, enjoying the out-breath. So it's one breath at a time. Don't think I've got to do this for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 20 minutes, to say just one breath at a time. Can I be present to one whole in-breath and one whole out-breath? And start again, one whole in-breath, one whole out-breath. Now there are various kinds of what we call skillful means or auxiliary techniques that help you to do that. And a kind of a warm-up method, which is quite useful, especially if your mind's very agitated for some reason, is to count your breaths. Now, the way to do this is your inhalation, you count 1, exhalation 1, inhalation 2, exhalation 2, in 3, out 3, in 4, out 4, in 5, out 5. And when you get to 5, you start again, and you start counting 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5, 6, 6. Okay. Then you start again, 1, 1, 2, 2 to 7. And then you count 1 to 8, and then 1 to 9, and then 1 to 10. And that's your initial goal. Can you be mindful and present for one cycle, meaning a count of 1 to 5, 1 to 6, 1 to 7, 1 to 8, 1 to 9, and 1 to 10. Now, why that particular technique is a good one to begin with is that it's easy to get discouraged, particularly when you're practicing alone, and it's in the sense that I'm not going anywhere, it's the same every time. That may or may not be the truth, but having this very simple, measurable goal in the beginning will give you a certain amount of self-confidence. You'll start, I can't even do this, I don't even get beyond 6 and my mind's gone already. But by persevering with it, then you find, yes, you can do it more and more easily. And so now you can say, well, yes, last week I couldn't do that at all. Now I can do it 2 whole cycles or 3 whole cycles. And so, yeah, this is something I can do. So that's important. The other particular value of this technique is that when your mind wanders, you become aware of it extremely quickly. It can't just become a mechanical kind of thing, which actually one part of your mind's on like a mantra or something, and the other part of your mind's sort of wandering all over the universe. But you can't remember. The moment your mind wanders, am I counting to 6 or to 7 or to 8? So the fact that you're changing the number that you count up to means that if you do wander, you're aware of it very quickly. So the counting is a good way to start. One, because it enables you to be aware much more quickly when you get distracted, and 2, because it is kind of a measurable thing that you can see you're improving with. But after a certain period of time doing this, say maybe 3 cycles, it becomes a bit burdensome. It's a kind of coarse method, and so then you want to just leave the counting and then just go to the sensation of the breath, and that's much more subtle and ultimately a lot more subtle. So I would say, like with that counting, you can start off doing that at home for sure, and if you can find the time to do a weekend retreat, I think that would be the best. It's something that you do in a kind of a formal situation with a group of people, and you get some kind of foundation, and then you feel you can take that away and do it.
You obviously use breathing rather than the mantra. But you've given one reason why it's a good idea for a beginner.
Many people in my tradition, many monks use a mantra, and it's not.
It holds the attention too. Yes,
these are all ways of just creating a bond or a glue, as it were, between your attention and your object. And some people really like mantra. And the thing with the mantra, you want to use a word which has some real meaning for you, and it's a 2-syllable word. So in Buddhist tradition we use a word derived from Buddha, so it's Buddho. So you divide it into 2 syllables. So on the in-breath is Bud, and on the out-breath To. but there's no reason why you couldn't use a word from another religious tradition. There's Jesus or Mary or anything, or some uplifting concept like kindness or anything. The thing is, it's two syllables, and it's something which it acts as a glue between your attention and the object.
I learned TM a long time ago, and we were given a mantra which had that.
Could you speak up so that we hear
Sorry,
the
I beg your
question?
pardon. Yes, I learned transcendental meditation a very long time ago, and we were taught that the word should have no meaning because it has no connotations which might distract us into contemplating the meaning of the word as opposed to simply using it to stop your mind from becoming distracted by passing thoughts.
Yes, it's both right. Really.
Yeah.
I mean that's one.
It's just another technique.
Yeah, I mean that's one attitude to it. I think that when you have a word like Buddha or something which has meaning, then the glue has an emotional dimension, and emotions, are very powerful. And if we learn how to deal with them, they can actually help us on the spiritual path. And sometimes, if you're meditating on the breath, and it gets a little bit stale. I'm talking about meditating for longer periods now. You can meditate on that concept, with the breath in the background, as it were. So, let's say as a Christian, you have so many. You find the figure of Jesus very uplifting, and so after the mind's been stabilized with the breath, just recollecting the qualities and the inspiring words of Jesus. This is a particular, another form of meditation. You can meditate in a discursive way. Let me give you an analogy, like giving up smoking. Okay, so two ways. One, you smoke 20 cigarettes a day, and so you say, right, that's it, I've stopped forever, and then you go through the kind of difficulties and the headaches or whatever, and then until you finally get past it. Or someone else might say, I can't just give up, I'm going to go down, okay, I'm going to smoke 19 for a few days, and then 18, and then 17, and then 16. Right. So if you're meditating just on your breath, it's like cutting off your 20 cigarette a day habit, just like that. Whereas if you take up a form of meditation requiring a certain amount of thought, it's like you're reducing your habit little by little. But that you have to think in a very systematic way, in a way that you've decided on beforehand, certain kinds of reflections. And then what happens is that after a certain point of time, the mind just naturally finds the thinking a little bit burdensome, and sort of just puts the thinking down because it's had enough. So sometimes this is a better way of dealing. And in Buddhist tradition, we even take a subject like death as a meditation object, and to actually be thinking and reflecting on death. It's a great taboo in society. We don't actually think about it, but thinking about the inevitability of your death, the fact that you don't know when it's going to happen. It could happen any time, in any way. So taking up a few of the basic, incontrovertible truths about death, and thinking about them and the implications. But because you're very clear, I'm only thinking about this, and you're not allowing your mind to wander off elsewhere. It's a disciplined kind of thought, that it can have the same calming effect as maintaining attention on the breath or some other object. And in certain occasions, it can be more successful.
You mentioned earlier about the UK retreat, Forest Sangha.
Yes.
I think it was. You said that it was aligned with your particular tradition.
Yes.
How many traditions are there?
Yes, sorry, that's kind of a vague word. Well, to begin with, I'm part of what's called the Theravada Buddhist tradition, large, which is the kind of Buddhism that we find in Sri Lanka, Thailand, Cambodia, Burma, so Southeast Asia these days. And it is, in some ways, the sort of the conservative tradition, in the sense that the sort of guiding ethos is that everything, that the Buddha taught a complete path of training or an education process which doesn't need anything added to or taken away from. And so we're just trying to uphold that tradition and to keep it alive and to train within it and to share it with others. Whereas the Buddhism that moved northwards and into China and Afghanistan, Iran, all the Stan countries and all those are all Buddhist at one time, and eastwards to Korea and Japan and also in Tibet. They were a lot more liberal, as it were, and willing to adapt to the societies in which they spread into much more. And so
So they've got kind of watered down.
yeah, they probably wouldn't look at it like that. They would say, they kept the essence, but were willing to compromise on the details, as it were. So the kind of, by the time you got to Japan, some of the Japanese Buddhist sects look at Buddhist teachings almost diametrically opposite ways to the way that Southern Buddhists would do. You have some in this school of Buddhism. The idea is the Buddha can't enlighten you; he can only show you the way. You have to develop this for yourself. Like if you're hungry, you have to eat yourself. Maybe someone can give you some nice food, but in the end, you have to take it. Or if it's medicine, you have to take the medicine yourself. Whereas though in Japan, you have this idea of mankind these days is weak and can't really practice what the historical Buddha said now, but you pray to some Buddha up in another heavenly world and he'll have compassion for you and help you. And so this is much more like a sort of theistic tradition. There's this huge kind of spectrum of Buddhisms, as you like. It's not just one Buddhism. Now within the Theravada Buddhist tradition, you have the idea of what we call a fourfold assembly. So it's not like in theistic traditions you have like a clergy which are sort of like halfway between the laity and the deity, and they're the sort of the people who are representatives of God on earth or so on. Whereas in Buddhism we have an idea of a society composed of monks, nuns, laymen and laywomen, and that there are porous boundaries between them. Whereas in Thailand it's traditionally been the case that every young man would be expected to become a monk at some time in his lifetime. Usually, say, after finishing school, before getting married, before starting a career, for 3 months, which is a period of a rains retreat. And it'd be very hard to make a good marriage if you've never been a monk. You'd be considered immature, untrustworthy, and many parents wouldn't want their daughter to marry someone who's never been a monk. Okay? Now this system still hasn't disappeared, but with modern development it's not strong as it used to be, and people not becoming monks for such a long time. But still, if you're a civil servant in Thailand, you can at one point in your career get 3 months paid leave to be a monk, and many people will take advantage of that. So if someone becomes a monk for 3 months, then it's a time when all the family will go to the monastery every day, or to offer food and to listen to teaching. So it's not just he himself, but his whole family receives the benefit. And then for the rest of his life, he has a sense of real connection with the monastery. Now, the order of monks in a country like Thailand is generally divided into 2 groups. You have the monks who live in the monasteries based right in the villages and the towns and the cities, and their life is more devoted to study and to more what we may call priestly responsibilities for the local people. So there's a very sort of close relationship with, and village monasteries have been traditionally the local hospital, hotel, meeting room, meeting place, the place where all the concerts take place, when there's the fairs. It's the place where all the monks can be the best craftsmen. It's the school, everything. It's not like a place with walls all around it. There's people walking in and out all the time. And then you have a smaller group of monks, which we call the forest monks, the forest tradition. And we live a bit further away from the villages and towns, in forests generally. And life is a lot more devoted to meditation practice, and the standards of the monastic discipline are kept much more strictly. And so when I use the word tradition, I beginning with the tradition of forest monks of Thailand, but within the group of forest monks with Thailand, there's one great teacher of the last century called Ajahn, and he was quite a remarkable monk in many ways. But one of the things that really distinguished him was that he was a monk who was able to attract large number of Western disciples. So beginning in the late 60s, you had mostly Americans, first generation, either Peace Corps workers or soldiers, American people who, one or two have been like on R&R as soldiers from Vietnam and got inspired. People have been on one of the air bases there. And then that was the beginning of sort of the whole hippie overland thing. And so a community of Western monks started to gather around him, and he built a monastery a few miles away from his own monastery, specifically for people from other countries who wanted to come and train as a Buddhist monk under his guidance, but where the teaching would be in English and things were made a little bit easier for newcomers. And that was the monastery in which I was the abbot for a number of years. Now, from that beginning, after a few years, started to be invitations to establish monasteries in other countries. The first one was in England, which had a trust set up many years ago, 50 years ago, with the idea of one day having like a homegrown monastic order, Buddhist monastic order. And first, in the mid-70s, the monks first were living in this townhouse on Haverstock Hill, if anybody knows Haverstock Hill, and next to a pub near Hampstead Heath. This is where I first got to know the monks, and so the monks would still go out on alms round every day, but as our teacher says, is don't think you're going out and getting food, you're going out to get people. And what he meant by that is, as a Buddhist monk, this is not an evangelical order, and a monk is actually forbidden from teaching anyone who doesn't ask them to teach. You can't sort of go up to somebody and say, look, have you heard the good news about Buddhism, or knock on their door or something like that. There has to be someone come towards you and then you should. So, but because we dress like this, then often people do come up and say, who are you, what are you doing, and so on. So the monks would go walking on Hampstead Heath every day. And then one day it was a jogger passed them, and he stopped and he said, look, can I go back and speak with you? And it turned out that he'd received an inheritance of a forest in Sussex, in West Sussex, with the proviso that he had to maintain it, he had to conserve it, he couldn't do anything to it, and he didn't have the resources, so he's looking for someone to look after this forest for him. And so we're monks looking for a forest to live in. And so, it's wonderful. And so they drove down there, and there was this big Victorian house just about 100 metres away from the forest, which was up for sale. So they bought the house, and that became what is now called Chithurst Forest Monastery, which is just near Petersfield in Sussex. And from there, in the 80s built another monastery, or established another monastery in the Chilterns just outside Hampstead. And that's the one, if you go on retreat, that would be probably the one where you would go. And then there are sort of outposts in Northumberland and Devon, and another one near Warwick in central England. And then after that, they've spread from there to Italy, and to Switzerland, and the latest one just opened last month in Germany. And then we have monasteries in Australia and New Zealand and America. So these are most of the monks who are running these monasteries have all been trained in northeast Thailand and then have received invitations to begin places in other countries. So that was really my mini tradition there. This is this group of monks, from all over the world who see themselves as disciples of Ajahn Chah, our teacher, who is now passed away.
How is it all financed? Is it all on contributions?
Yes, there's monks. This is one case where the forest monks keep the rules more strictly. I mean, we're not allowed to touch money. I haven't touched money for 30 years. So it's wonderful. Yeah. And monks are not allowed to sort of canvass for funds or make any demands from lay people for anything. I'm allowed to ask for water if it's available, or if I was to go for a bath in the river and someone stole my robes, I could ask for something to cover me up, so I wouldn't be embarrassed in public. But that's all I'm allowed to ask for, unless someone specifically made an offering. If you need anything, just tell me. Or someone like James, my supporter. Or I could ask for something from my mum. I can ask for something from my mum, but I can't ask for something from my sister-in-law because it has to be a blood relation. Yeah. Unless, of course, she makes something. So it's all financed by voluntary contributions. Yeah. And so if I'm travelling, come here from Thailand, I can only do this because somebody says they'd like to offer me a plane ticket because I can't finance my own.
A quick question from Margaret.
Yes, are there women monks? Do you have nuns, or is it all?
Yes, well, I think this is a really big issue in Thailand at the moment, and it's throughout the Buddhist world. There are nuns in Thailand, but they're not the nuns, the original order of nuns that existed at the time of the Buddha, and this was because the order of nuns in India disappeared, or just sort of became extinct about 1,000 years after the Buddha passed away, so over 1,000 years. And so when Buddhism spread to Southeast Asia, just after that, there were already no nuns. So there's no historical tradition of nuns, what we call the bhikkhunis, in Thailand. But they have a sort of a kind of a lay nun tradition, which is basically not, I think, sufficient for women's needs, but particularly now. And there is a general movement which began in Sri Lanka, and often it's Western women who are behind this. We're trying to find ways to revive the original bhikkhuni order. So there are various kind of solutions to this problem. It's kind of technical, but I think generally it's agreed that in the Southeast Asian Buddhist countries that there is a need to do something more to create the kind, for women, the kind of monastic training that the men have access to. Now, having said that, all monasteries have facilities and are open for women to go and stay and to receive teachings from the monks. And so it's not a problem of access to teachings and to training so much as giving a proper opportunity for women to have a monastic vocation. That's really what's lacking at the moment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we know what a forest monk is, and not what we first thought. Dan, thank you very much for bringing attention so we could have you talk today. You've got lots of food for thought. So I'm going to be living in the present, having plenty of vision, and learning to be here and now. So I would like to just give you a little gift of flowers, one for each of your family, the colour of the Buddhist smile.
One.
Because I know you're here only for a short time. And we'd also like to thank the welcomers for taking care of us today, and Amy to take the money, and the ladies in the kitchen. So thank you very much for your presence.